last 5 years since we started, and he's the kind of guy that I wanted to have represent me in the state government and beyond. So we'll have to see what the Lord does with him, but he's going to come up tonight and introduce our guest speaker, Steve Toth.
Thanks, Pat. I'm going to give you a little legislative update too as well, and Pat probably forgot that I was going to do that, but there are 12 days left in the 85th legislative session, just 12 days. So let's look at this for a second. Republicans have nearly a 2/3 majority in both the House and the Senate, and nearly none of the conservative legislation has made it through the House. It's all made it through the Senate. All the emergency bills that Governor Abbott asked to be put on the agenda, these are very low number bills that have already sailed through the Senate, have absolutely stopped at the Texas House door. All the pro-life legislation has died. All the Second Amendment legislation has died. All the property tax reform legislation has died. It's all made it through the Senate, but it's stopped right at the House door because of Joe Straus. Straus is so committed to killing all pro-life legislation that he took the Texas Medical Board, which is sunsetting this year, along with 4 or 5 other agencies, and he would not allow the Texas Medical Board sunset bill to come to the House floor. Do you know why? Because it could be amended to reflect any pro-life legislation. So what he did was he dumped it all into an omnibus bill, hoping somehow, against hope, that this way we could get all this through without supporting any pro-life causes, any pro-life amendments in legislation. Thankfully, the Freedom Caucus killed it, and now it's going to get pushed into Now it will get pushed into a special session, or he's going to have to allow it onto the House floor in the next 12 days, where we'll be able to finally get some good pro-life legislation that will save the lives of children. But again, this goes back to the failure of leadership on the part of Joe Straus. Abraham Lincoln, whether you're a Federalist or not, if you're a Federalist, you probably don't like Lincoln. If you're not a Federalist, you probably love Lincoln. Lincoln said something that both sides will probably agree on. He said, if you have we the people on your side, you can get anything done. If you don't have we the people on your side, you can get nothing done. That means that as legislators, we're primarily responsible for educating people about the truth, the reality on the ground in Austin. And legislators that refuse to speak the truth about who Joe Straus is only confuse the people of Texas into believing that this guy's actually a Republican, because he's not. The man I have the greatest respect for in Austin was the man that I went to when I decided to run for the Texas House, and that's Ken Paxton. He was the state legislator at the time. He was in the Texas House. And I came in the 83rd legislative session. He got out of the House and went over to the Senate to get away from me. And in the 82nd session, Ken Score was the most conservative member of the Texas legislature. So if you take 31 senators, 150 House members, 181 total, Ken was the most conservative. And I thought, my goal is to be more conservative than Paxton. Couldn't do it.
No.
And he was number 1 again. I was number 5. Ken's the kind of guy, when he sees the moral right way to go, when he sees the right path, he's going to do it no matter what it costs. And those are the kind of public servants that we need in Austin. Those are the kind of public servants that we need in Washington, D.C. It's the only way we'll turn our country around. No matter what the cost, I'm going to do the right thing. And that's Ken. And I could not be more honored to introduce him tonight, our Attorney General, Ken Paxton.
So Steve is not the usual legislator. I told him, I was giving him a little bit of a hard time because I know his name, Steve Toth. I have a guy now that works for me named Mike Toth, and I can never get his name right now. I can't get his last name right, and I often call him Steve instead of Mike.
Right.
So I even call my wife Steve sometimes, but that's all right. Well, a lot of you know that I ran for Attorney General about 3 years ago, and I did really well in the Republican primary in certain counties. We got 70% of the vote in Denton County, 70% of the vote in Tarrant County, 70% of the vote in Harris County, 70% of the vote in Fort Bend County, 70% of the vote in my own county, Collin. But there was one county that I did really, really well in that was 74%. Anybody have an idea what county that might have been? Montgomery County. So I have to come back here to thank you all for giving me my highest vote percentage in the state, and thank you very much. I appreciate it. A lot of you also know, since I came from Collin County, represented Collin County both the House and the Senate, that it's a pretty conservative county. It's much like this. As a matter of fact, Collin is as much like Montgomery as I've seen. It was the closest two counties that I saw in the state as being very, very similar. And so when I moved to Austin, obviously Austin and Travis County are much more liberal, very Democratic. A lot of people were wondering, how do you deal with living in a Democratic county, a liberal county? And I really say it's not that bad, because Austin is really not that far from Texas. So I really haven't had that much trouble living there, because I can get out pretty quick. I've also had, I want to tell you a quick story about my wife. It has nothing to do with politics, but it'll give you a little insight on my family. So my wife's birthday is Valentine's Day. And I actually tried to get married on that day, so all days would be the same and I wouldn't have to remember them all. My mother-in-law wouldn't let that happen. So anyway, so when Valentine's Day comes by, when it's coming, I feel a little higher hurdle pressure about kind of having a good birthday and a good Valentine's Day. And so this year I planned it out pretty well. We got up early on a Sunday morning, and we drove to the airport. We flew out from Dallas to LA, and we went to this really great lunch place. The weather was perfect. We're just kind of enjoying ourselves for a couple hours. And then we left there after lunch, and we went back to our hotel. We got dressed up, and we went over to this restaurant right across from the Staples Center in downtown LA. And we went to this restaurant and met some friends of mine who work for Universal Studios. And they were putting together a pre-Grammy party. So we were there for a couple hours, and then we walked across to the Staples Center. We were there for 4 hours for the Grammys. So we got to see all the, cool artists. My wife loves music, and so we got to see Beyonce, and Katy Perry, and Keith Urban, and literally you name it, they were there, Adele. And so we spent 4 hours there, and then afterwards we went to a post-Grammy party. We're out kind of late for me. We're out 2 in the morning, and of course that's 4 in the morning Texas time. So anyway, went back to the hotel room. We got up the next morning, headed back to the airport, coming back to Texas, and I kind of smugly looked at my wife Angela and I said, I did pretty well, didn't I? And she said, you're off to a good start. So I had to deliver on Valentine's Day too, 2 days later. So anyway, so a lot of people have been really concerned about me over the last several months because Obama's not in office anymore. And we sued the federal government 27 times, and I've only been in office about that many months, 27 months. And so they were worried about what I was going to do with my life, and what should I do with the extra time. And so a lot of my friends like Steve have suggested various things, maybe an extra day of vacation here and there, more time off, maybe not working on Fridays so hard. And actually Steve on the way in suggested counseling for me. But I just want you to know it's going to be all right, because I still have the city of Austin to sue. So we did that last week. So let me just tell you what gets me up in the morning. We still have some amazing things to do. About a year ago, a little over a year ago, year and a half ago, we started a human trafficking unit. Why did we do